A very good morning to you. It is time for Your World, which again, when it clocks 8 a.m., you know it is time for Your World. So welcome to the show. My name is Winnie Lubembe. I know it's very, very chilly morning right here in Nairobi, but hey, we find good in every bad, right? So listen to this. Only 27 days left before the country goes for the general elections. While this is such a vital process for the country, there is a lot that is going on that has pushed Kenyans to the brink. COVID-19 pandemic, the high cost of living, and of course that's coupled with election stress. So how exactly are we dealing with the election stress, and how can we protect our mental state during this period? Well, that is what we're focusing on today on the show. So you want to stick around until the end of the conversation to understand more about our mental health and elections and how these two are interrelated. But better yet, how then you can protect yourself or prevent from getting to that point of election stress disorder, which we talked about earlier on. But of course, we'll be, expounding more on the show today. So before we get into the conversation, as per usual, we need to remind you about the COVID-19 pandemic still here with us. The numbers are rising day by day, and in the country, we're dealing with a sixth wave of the same. So then what do the numbers look like? Let's start on a global scale. And up until now, 561,788,869 total confirmed COVID-19 cases, 534,680,361 total number of recoveries recorded across the globe. But unfortunately, we've lost 6,374,783 people, again, to COVID-19, and this is across the globe. But let's come back to the country. And according to the Health Ministry, remember the statistics are always released every single day, right? So up until now, 335,929, and that is the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country, 328,284 total number of recoveries, but unfortunately we've lost 5,668 people to COVID-19. So that tells you the pandemic is still here with us, and it's up to us, not only the government, but up to us to also make sure that we observe all the protocols laid by the WHO together with the Health Ministry to halt the spread of COVID-19, and especially now in the cold season. All right, just try as much as possible and just, do all you have to do to protect yourself and those ones around you. So coming back to the conversation of the day, we have a question for you, all right? And that is as far as the election stress. And the question that we're asking you is, how have you been impacted by the ongoing campaigns? And that is the question that we're asking you. How have you been mentally impacted by the ongoing campaign? Are you feeling a bit of stress? Are you okay? There's a lot of decisions to be made. So how are you feeling? What is your mental state like? That is what we want to know today. So as per usual, feel free to interact with us on our social media platforms. And that is at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie on Twitter, or on Facebook at NTV Kenya. But better yet, you want to call in live, ask a question, tell us how you're feeling. Well, feel free to do so. The numbers will be down on your screen in just a moment. But at the end of the day, let's just help one another to stay sane during this ongoing campaign period and even after the elections, all right? And of course, to help us drive the conversation even further, I am joined by Diana Chipko, who is a senior psychologist and staff care specialist at Thrive Worldwide. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well this morning.
It's quite chilly, isn't it?
I know.
But it's warmer in here, yeah?
It's warm. You're lucky. Outside, it's very chilly.
Cold.
Yeah,
it's very cold,
yeah,
but again, all the weather we appreciate, right?
Yeah.
So let's just get to understand, first of all, elections and mental state. I know, some people will be like, these are two different, entities, but why are we talking about it together? So what is the correlation between our mental state and the elections?
Well, the correlation between our mental health and election is how are we responding towards the elections season at the moment? Because election, it's an exciting time. I mean, it's the time to elect your preferred candidate, your preferred government. It's the time to have your voice heard, you know, but then again, it can be a time that triggers past difficult experiences for some people. And also bearing in mind the kind of season we've been in, you know, COVID-19 since 2019, 2020, 2021. So we are going through the byproduct of the pandemic, and it was exhausting. People lost jobs, people were sick, people lost relatives and family members. So all those kind of emotions coupled down now to the election year. And this is a significant year because it's the start of a new government, end of a term. So people want their voice to be heard. You know, the marginalized communities, they want to be heard. People who feel they've been oppressed or discriminated upon, they want to be heard. So all these factors with the high cost of living that is currently ongoing, you know, unga, 200 shillings, you know, so you can imagine how Kenyans are navigating this season, the economy, COVID-19, and the history of political polarization. We are very competitive.
Yes.
You talk about a certain candidate, certain party. People are so passionate, and it's a good thing. But then again, it can go beyond and become something toxic, something fanatic, which is not irrational. It's not rational, if I could put it that
Absolutely.
way.
Absolutely. And like we said, this year's election again it's big. It's very critical. And like you said, us Kenyans, we are very passionate, you know, and if we have like a preferred candidate, we will try as much as possible and let our neighbor know this is why.
Exactly.
And also try to pull them you know, to our side. But at the same time, comparing to the previous elections, for example, let's talk 2007, right? And then 2013. Again, we've had like previous elections. But I'm just curious in terms of how were people responding then and how are people responding now? And especially with the ongoing campaigns, there are a lot of back and forth, blaming each other. Like, it's just too much, you know? So comparing then and now, is there a difference in terms of how people are responding?
Well, there's a sense of, I will use complacency, which is, it can be a reaction to stress or trauma. You know, when people get exhausted and tired, and especially of the kind of narrative we've been hearing around, you know, some people are exhausted with the leadership system, corruption and whatnot, and there are people who are still passionate, you know, to elect their preferred candidate. So the excitement is there, but people are not as invested as they were back then. And that can also, the factors of COVID-19, the economic, will also come into play in this context. And the avoidance aspect, you know, the sense of exhaustion, there's been too much political conversation, which is a good thing. And people can tend to be inactive at this time, not to partake of political engagement.
I mean, even looking at the registration, a lot of people, and especially most of them young people, most of them did not register. And according to a poll that I saw, one of the biggest reasons is they were busy. They did not have time, you know, to go and register. So I hear what you're saying in terms of, yes, we understand this is a process that, again, we have to go through as a country, but at the same time, the economy, we're trying to feed our families. So we have sort of our priorities, you know, in place. And then this one comes in later. But there's also that question of whether you vote or not. It's sort of like you have voted, you know, in a way, and that contributes to then the results and what will happen even after. And of course, today we'll be looking at, you know, the pre-election, the election period, and even post-election. But the question is then, why is this conversation that we're having today so vital, and especially when it comes to our mental health? Because again, like you're saying, we're already stressed.
We are.
But then why is it so important to have this conversation now, even as we head towards the election, which is, what, 27 days away?
It's important to have this conversation because we want to be aware. And most Kenyans can sweep things under the carpet. Oh, mental health and election, how is it even connected? Because mental health has also been stigmatized for a very long time. But COVID-19 brought made people aware that indeed we are struggling and it's important to ask for help. So we are having this conversation because of awareness. We want to create that awareness. How are you coping? And it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. You know, you might be coping well, it's okay. You might be avoidant, you know, or you might be struggling. We also want to acknowledge people who are affected in 2007, 2017, there were people who were affected. So it's important to have this conversation to increase the level of self-awareness as individuals, as organizations as well, at the workplace. How are you coping with your colleagues who have diverse political views at this time? You know, and you're trying not to have that conversation. But then again, it's happening. So how are people coping at the workplace? How are leaders managing their organization at this sensitive time?
Absolutely. And also understanding how politics, again, affects us. It's like, it's everywhere. I mean, we cannot talk about religion without also talking about politics. We cannot talk about health without talking about like politics is there, whether we like it or not, whether we avoid it or not, it's there and it impacts us in one way or the other. So then when we talk about the election stress, right? Is it something that is easily noticeable? Like me as a person sitting here, is it something that I can sit and point and say, you know what, I'm actually feeling this way because of what is around me, and especially with the ongoing campaigns and back and forth again, and as far as you know, people who are vying for different positions in the office, different offices. So is it that obvious to point out and say, this is how I'm feeling because of what is going on around? Or what exactly does that look like when we talk about election stress?
Well, stress, just from definition, is a response to threat in the environment or pressure or demands in the environment. So stress is a normal part of life. It can be positive, it can be negative. And even in this context, it's positive because it shows that you care for your country. It shows that you care for your community. You care for the next generation and the leadership for this community. So it's normal to feel stressed at this time due to like election. So it's not a diagnosis, election stress. It's just a term made up by an American psychologist, election stress. But it's just the stress that you are exhibiting as a result of this season. And that can be identified even through your body. You know, maybe you realize that you're sleeping less hours, 5 to 6 hours than usual because of the fear and worry and concern of the August 9th. Your eating habits as well, your diet is affected, or you find that you're increasing your alcohol intake or drugs to sort of numb the fear and worry. So it can be seen through changes in your body. High blood pressure, diabetes, also your mood as well. You find yourself easily irritable at the slightest of things. At work, they'll ask you about a report and you just snap so easily. So you become more vulnerable even to the emotions around you.
Absolutely.
And I can use an analogy of whereby we have the adult brain, the brain that we use on our day-to-day function to, for profound cognitive functions, to make decisions. And it's very logical and rational. But then again, when we are under pressure or stress, the toddler brain is activated, the child brain. And you know, the child brain is very egocentric. It's about me. And also it's vulnerable to the emotions in the environment. Take an example, when you come home as a mom and you had a very bad day at work and you meet your kids, it's so easy that your children will be able to observe your emotion and the atmosphere at home will change in seconds. Watakimbia, you know, mama amefika, she's all gloomy, she's angry. So the toddler brain picks emotions in the environment. So when we are fearful and worried about the elections, we are able to pick the feelings of our neighbor, the feelings of our colleague, and we become egocentric. Like, it has to be my candidate leader. It has to be this
party.
Have
to listen to
They
me.
have to win. We are making sense. That the manifesto doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense.
So that's the unfortunate part of the brain that's activated during this season.
During this period. And even aside from that, there's also that aspect of I am stressed as an individual, right? Who will go to the ballot and vote? But I'm just thinking about that person who's vying for whatever position. You know, it is a lot for them, especially right now, right?
It is. There's so much fear, anxiety. You've invested. And we understand you want to make a difference. You want to make a change. But it's also an important time to be rational in how you invest yourself in politics, because you can easily get lost. You can be overwhelmed. Your mental health can be impacted. So it's a burden for them. And I know we tend to forget about the leaders.
No, as we're just thinking them they know human beings.
Exactly.
But they are impacted in one way or the other. And of course, based on what is happening, there's a lot of investment that needs to be put in place. And not only in terms of financial, but also emotional. You have to be there all the time, campaigning and make sure that people, buy your idea and vote for you in the process, anxiety, and all those things. There's a report I just read yesterday, and they're talking about how even the leaders themselves are stressed. Most of them actually going into depression because there's some who this is their last term and they're like, so then what is my life after this? So there's a lot that is going on. So then at this point, in terms of then understanding that at the end of the day, in as much as it's a vital process, for us as a country, that we need to sort of like be empathetic with one another, that understanding, bring that, to us in terms of then how do we correlate with one another with the passion that we have, but at the same time, with that understanding that we need to be a little bit empathetic with one another.
Well, I think in terms of coping, this is the best time to model a good citizen. And good citizenship can look like treating people with respect and empathy. And it just starts with you. It starts with the confidence that I'll show up and support my neighbor despite their political affiliation. Because it's been our country, the history of election has been tribalism and ethnicity has embodied the political situation, the context. So this is the time to take that bold move and show up and be kind to your mama mboga, wherever she comes from. So it's a matter of stepping up and embracing empathy and respect, and even it circles down to organizations. Staff are also dealing with this situation in different ways. So this is the best time where leaders can create a workplace culture whereby there's safety, there's trust. There's that opportunity to have difficult conversations with respect, because it's the giant in the room. We cannot avoid politics and elections. And the most important thing is to over-communicate and to listen to your staff.
And we'll come back to the organization in just a moment, because again, there's a lot that needs to be put in place by different organizations just to make sure that it's conducive, because we're different people coming from different cultures and we come together to work. So then the aspect of respect for one another, I think it's key. But at the same time, I'm sure you've had a lot of people say, don't bring politics at home or don't bring politics in the office. But like we're saying, we cannot avoid to talk about politics now. So then how do we approach these conversations without sort of stepping on one another's stool? How do we approach this?
Courage. Courage to talk about it.
Do we avoid it completely? Can we even?
We cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid. This is the time where we need to step in those one-on-one, in those team sessions, just to check in. How are you coping? How are you processing this season? When leaders model vulnerability at the workplace, people feel seen, people feel heard, people feel valued and supported. And that's a very important skill during this time to talk about it. And apart from talking about it, also to champion for civic engagement, go and vote. Because why are people stressed or anxious? It's because they have that sense of loss of control. I can't do anything about the campaign. I can't do anything about a certain candidate. So what can you do? You can actually vote. And vote is psychologically healthy. Because it gives you a sense of empowerment and your voice is heard. So let the leaders champion for people to vote, to have that civic engagement. And also finally to signpost them to relevant support services. And that can look like psychosocial support.
For everyone else. And then that aspect of fine, we can talk about it. We can talk about it in a respectful manner. But then again, when it comes to the leaders and the impact that they have on us as a people, and case in point, I think we can just look back at what happened, of course, during the governor's, debate yesterday.
Yes.
There was a lot that was happening. It was such an interesting, thing to see, such an interesting debate to see. And on social media, there is a lot that is happening. So then, to what extent should we allow leaders to sort of impact us? Do we draw boundaries, or what happens? Also, because sometimes we are affected that we don't even know that it's what this leader said that is making me either feel this way, so that to what extent do we allow them, or should we allow them in the first place?
You've actually answered drawing boundaries. It's important. And even talking about social media, because social media is whereby it's a platform for communication of a message, but not individuality.
Okay.
So you realize people want to be heard and to be seen, and that can be frustrating on social media. So we need to create those boundaries. We need to know our limits.
Okay.
It can even come to consumption of the news. And I know I'm here, and I want people
Please
to
watch.
see this. But then again, sometimes, the media, there's so much adrenaline going on. A certain candidate has done this, the other one has done this. So there's too much headlines, and that can be overwhelming. So how does it look like to draw limits, the number of hours you spend on news and social media as well?
Okay.
So it goes back to recognize the kind of boundaries you need to create. Why do I need to create this boundary? What am I trying to achieve when I create this boundary? And now finding the courage and confidence to speak up, that I'll need to step away from this conversation. Even at work, maybe there's a certain group talking about politics and you feel agitated. So finding the courage to walk away and to communicate.
Communicate effectively how you're feeling.
Yes.
Okay. But at the same time, remember, like we said, we cannot avoid all this completely, right?
Yeah.
And I hear you when you talk about consumption of news and to what extent we should. There's also aspect of balance, right? Because you cannot avoid all these things completely and just pretend like nothing is going on. We are not going to watch news forever until elections are over, but we need to also be on the know in terms of what is happening and all those things. So balance. Balance becomes a very important key in this sense. So that what will be your advice? And especially to someone who knows, number one, I'm already triggered, but I also need to understand what is going on. How then do we balance that?
Information is power. Being aware, even as you watch news, that's another way of coping, because you're gaining that information. But then again, it's being able to notice when you're getting overwhelmed, when you're getting irritable, even by noticing your body when you're watching the news. Sometimes you feel like your temperature is rising, your heartbeat is increasing. It's like being very aware to the tiniest of details about your body response, your mood in the house. Maybe there's a certain information that has popped up on the screen, and everyone is just silent and tired. So being aware to notice a change in your body, your mind, in your thinking, and making that decision now to step away for a couple of minutes and now to come back. So the stepping away means also, how do I cope?
That's the thing.
That exact time. What do I need to do? Do I need to talk about it? Do I need just to take a walk? Simple activities just to distract us and to calm us at that exact time.
At the end of the day. And also dealing with the same, again, that in terms of a lot is happening, especially now with the campaigns. And some people might be triggered by the term debate, vote. It's a lot, right, for one person. And then put in COVID-19. And then there's also the high cost of living. So, of course, we are already stressed. As it is right now, but also in terms of the families and understanding how this can have an impact on us as an individual, but also protecting and shielding our children from the same. Because even right now, like, even walking around the estates, you will hear children say things and you're like, first of all, how old are you? How do you understand those things? How are you able to comprehend those things? So in terms of then shielding the children, because like you said earlier on, they absorb everything that we do through our actions. We might not say, but whatever it is that we do, they see. So then shielding our children, protecting them, so that they don't, get to that point of being heavily impacted by politics. Because they also have school.
They do. And they hear stories.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do we do that?
Yeah, boundaries at home, because it starts with you as a parent. What are the kind of conversations you're having at home? And because you can instill fear, you can instill hate and anger at home. And kids observe, because they notice when a certain candidate pops on the screen, there's a certain comment mom and dad actually makes about the candidate and even about the tribe or the ethnicity. So being mindful with the kind of conversations we are having at home with our children, it's very important. And also having honest conversations about what the season is about. Just because kids need a lot of reassurance of safety, periodic reassurance of safety. And you notice that they'll ask questions, the simplest of things, what's going on, what will happen after this and this. So it's important to be honest, but at the same time to protect them from toxic information. So it goes back to the parent.
Again,
what are the conversations?
What are the conversations that you're having?
Yes,
at home. I like that. All right, so how about we take a break? But of course, when we come back, we'd also want to understand. So fine, it is important for us to make sure that we're aware, first of all, of ourselves in terms of how we're responding to the ongoing campaigns and the elections, and what we're consuming. But at the same time, understanding that we have a vital role, and like you said, it's empowering to go and vote, because it's you have the power to decide who you want to serve you. But at the same time, during the elections and even after, what's going to happen? Because there's usually a lot of anxiety around, the the ballot, right? There's usually a lot of anxiety that is going on. So then how do we cope with the same? And also organizations. Because again, like you said, people might not know what's going to happen after the election. So there's also that aspect of will I still have my job or not? What's going on? All right. So it's a lot to unpack. After the short break, stay with us. This is Your World. But remember the question that we're asking you today, and that is, how have you been impacted mentally by the ongoing campaigns? I'll be looking at your feedback as well after the short break. Stay with us. See you soon. Right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. Just sampling some of your feedback on Facebook. You guys have a lot to say. Of course, we'll be sampling them in just a moment. Remember, it's all about mental health and elections. And I know most of you are saying you do not watch news, you avoid watching news, and others are talking about, the insults in the ongoing campaign. So again, like I said, we're sampling all of them, and of course, I'll be reading them in just a moment. But to help us with the conversation, we have Diana Chipko, who's a senior psychologist and staff care specialist at Thrive Worldwide. And of course, Diana, we're talking about how, again, as an individual, we'll be impacted. The candidates themselves, I can imagine this time, it can be very stressful for them. But let's talk about organizations. And now, of course, their targets to be met by the different organizations before the elections. There's also that aspect of restructuring and getting to understand, so then where do we stand? Will the elections maybe affect different organizations or not? And even after the elections, what is the workplace, going to be like? So let's get to understand then, in this day and now, not this day and age, but now, even as we're preparing for the elections. What is it, and what exactly is it about the organizations that sort of like need to put their house in order, even as we prepare for elections? What does that look like?
How it looks like in organizations at the moment is the aspect of support by the leaders. And as I'd mentioned earlier, this is another opportunity to really have opportunities to listen to the staff. Because it's a giant in the room. We cannot avoid having political, not even conversations, but acknowledging how people are coping at such a time. So it starts by preparing your team to thrive in this season, because it's possible to thrive.
It is.
Yeah,
It
as
is,
much
yeah.
as it's challenging, it's possible. So how does thriving looks like in your organization, in your team? By having honest conversations. How are people coping as well? Another tool can also look like how you're preparing your to-do before the August 9th. It's also not advisable to have deadlines near the 9th of August or even just after the 9th of August, so that the team are not pressured and focus on having this specific deadline to be met. Because with the overwhelming season, for some, they can be less motivated or distracted at work. So performance can be affected as we near the election. For some, hostility between the teams because of the very political opinions. Yeah, so it's important to be on the lookout. How is your team responding at this time? How is productivity? How is the engagement? Are they motivated? Do they need support? And do you have the systems of support? Because how does it look like? So leadership, they have to model. It has to start from the top. You know, in terms of empathy, in terms of respect, in terms of healthy stress management skills by the leaders, so that the staff can see that it's a natural thing to be possibly overwhelmed or to just to be okay at this time. So it has to start from the top. Yeah, and the way I'd mentioned, championing for civic engagement, spaces for vulnerability. I also think it's an important time to sort of reflect on diversity, equity, and inclusivity, because how the election comes in is whereby people come from different groups, different ethnic communities, and that has been symbolized even with the kind of party leader that you championing for on the August 9th. So it's a time also to reflect on the policies of diversity at the workplace. Is there a particular gender or a particular ethnic group that are being discriminated upon? How does it look like? Because people have varying political ideas, but then again, we can have grounding conversations at work whereby we are discussing about our shared values, our shared mission as an organization, and bringing people together to have that sense of unity. Because that's the way you can manage the stress and anxiety of the season, that sense of belonging, that they have a place despite the different political
everything else, that is going on, they can still feel safe and hard, even in a workplace. Now you're talking about leaders. I know the leaders will be like, but we're also human at the end of the day. What do we do? What are some of the skills that then we need to sort of have that we can also pass that down, you know, to again everybody else in the office, just to make sure that the office or the workplace or even the business, because again there are people who are running businesses as well and have people who are working under them, just to make sure that it is it's an environment where everybody can thrive, you know, like we're saying, despite our political differences, despite our affiliations. How then do leaders, what are some of the skills that they need to have here?
Well, they need to be aware. How are you managing? How are you coping? Because at the end of the day, you can never give from an empty cup or an empty plate. So you need to take a few steps back, reflect, pause and think, how am I managing at this season? How am I leading at this season? Do I need support? And that comes from vulnerability, even to seek support in terms of coaching, in terms of counseling as well, in terms of connecting with your fellow leaders in the sector and having conversations of how are we coping in general? What are the challenges that we're having? So it circles back to awareness as a leader, the courage to look for help. Because, you know, as a leader, I'm strong. I can manage. We don't talk about emotions. So you have to be strong.
Or sometimes you're not given that safe space to say, hey, I am not okay. I know I'm your leader. I know I'm supposed to be strong, but at the same time, I'm human and I have emotions. I can feel things, you know. So some are not given that opportunity. So it's like, let me bottle my emotions, deal with it, and then, you know, come back to the scene later on. Of course, this is very detrimental, isn't it?
We need to create those spaces to support our leaders, to have those conversations. How are we leading at this time? What do we need to look into? What kind of practices do we need to embody at the workplace to support our team? So it goes back to vulnerability, the courage to say, hey, I need help. I need to talk about this. How can we lead to have a confident team even after the elections?
Oh, I like that. And of course, we'll come back in just a moment to talk about even after the elections. But we have feedback, and the question that we asked you, and that is, have you been impacted mentally or affected mentally by the ongoing campaigns? That is the question that we're asking you today. Let's get to hear what you have to say. So Oscar Audio Chieng Wood Game, where says, yes, politicians going around peddling lies and confused Kenyans clapping, all right? And then Benson Chue says, why should it affect me? It will not cater for my needs. Okay. And then someone else says, this is Nancy Kennedy says, I'm affected because most aspirants are clueless. Okay. And then someone else says, this is Stephen Odhiambo says, I don't think so. And what affects me is how I hear politicians campaign with the name of unga and other common commodities. Okay. And then someone else says, this is Eli Khan Okun Aguero says, I'm just calling for peace. And that is important. We all calling for peace. All right. And then Rose Chesoli Nakai says, how now? Focus ni kutafuta pesa. Whether Ruto or Baba wins, 1,000 shillings will remain 1,000 shillings. All right. And Hila Hilash says, yes, I'm disturbed seeing politicians yapping and insulting each other instead of articulating ideas. All right. And then someone else says, Felix Ochieng says, yes, I'm tired of hearing tutaweka bilioni kwa hawa vijana. All right. Okay, I hear you, Felix. And then Spicely Vidange says, yes, because you can imagine a journalist asking the incoming governor, what is your name? Okay, all right, it's a lot, But one thing that I'm getting from the feedback is the fact that, remember we talked about cost of living and we're dealing with all this stress, right? So, and it's like whether we like it or not, we're sort of affected. And a lot of people are saying, yes, I am affected. I want to hear policies. I want to hear what would you do to change the current situation in the country. But we do not hear that. All we see is insults, here and there. So whether we like it or not, we are sort of affected by the same. And of course, we talked about coping earlier on. But just in case someone missed the aspect of recognizing how you are affected, what does that look like? And then what can we do to sort of shield our mental health, because it's all we need.
Yeah,
especially now, we need mental strength.
Exactly. Exactly. Indeed, people are affected from those comments. There's a sense of agitation, anger, and even avoidance, and more on the economy related issues. And people are really passionate to see leaders who can champion for constructive policies, but not the insults that's going on. But it goes now to boundaries as well, which I had mentioned. Boundaries. I've liked how someone has mentioned about whether or not Baba or Ruto gets becomes the president.
It doesn't change. It still remains the same.
So it's to have that awareness that politics, as much as it's an integral part of our lives, it can also be a game full of theatrics, very dramatic. People are selling different ideologies, and with that, these are people who are still friends.
That's the thing.
And we forget, we rally different parties.
I mean, even yesterday during the debate, you saw the two video, that is Sakaja and Igathe. Even after the heated video, they were talking. They were, right?
Yeah, they did. And that's what we tend to forget, because we've given these people a table in how we think and how we do life. The moment we create that boundary and have that understanding that this is someone who's looking for a job like any other. I just need to listen to them keenly to know if I can buy into the idea or not. And that's completely okay. So having that boundary to protect your peace, your well-being, to focus on what you need to do at home, to put food on the table, how to take care of yourself, to vote, to communicate on what you want. So it's relinquishing control from your end, voting, being a good citizen, rest sometimes, community support, be engaged with your community, with your family, because the more you're isolated, the more you might be exposed to being overwhelmed or having mental health issues. So this is the time to be connected with your community, to find hope and joy. We want peace. And the beauty is, Kenyans are very resilient people. We are very resilient. The way we managed to bounce back from 2007 and 2017, I believe we will be able to bounce through this, So having that sense of hope and community and the spirit of resilience is what is going to help us.
And I like the fact that we talked about how, again, I think people have changed. We're moving from more of like, I'm voting for this person because they come from my tribe, to what are you bringing on the table?
Exactly.
And that's a good place to start. But again, and like we said earlier on, of course, we must recognize that there's some people who were heavily and directly affected by the 2007, 2008, again, post-election violence. And most of them, or some of them, might still, you know, have trauma, you know, from the same. So even as we are again heading into this year's election, so in terms of dealing with the trauma, you know, and coping with the same, because it can be a very, you know, anxious period for most of them, because again, we do not know the outcome. All we can hope for is for peace. So then dealing with that trauma and overcoming the trauma, what would you say, you know, that should look like, or that looks like for them?
Indeed, it's important to acknowledge that there are people who were affected, and many people were affected in 2007. And I think this is the time to be aware again, how am I responding to the current campaign season, the upcoming elections? Because what we are noticing is election triggers that people could possibly have, especially those who were affected in 2007. And, you know, am I very irritable lately? Am I avoidant of particular locations? When I hear a certain song or a certain smell, does it remind me of something that happened to me in 2007? So it's important to be aware. It's important to be connected with people and to ask for help. And that can also look like support groups, you know, going to meet people who are affected as well, discussing how you're coping at this time, what kind of support might you need, and also to recognize if your day-to-day activities are affected, you know, maybe at work you're underperforming, at home you're not as connected, you might also need to seek for psychosocial support, because trauma can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. And when you're having nightmares or flashbacks, maybe you are attacked, maybe you lost a relative, you lost property, you were displaced, it's important to ask for help at this time, just to check in how you're processing the trauma.
And also recognizing, because again, politicians and campaigns, and sometimes they can be reckless, you know, words thrown up and about. So, and understanding how, again, this person was heavily affected and directly, you know, affected by the same, but also getting to that point of taking back your power, right? Because like we said, by voting, we're exercising our power. By choosing the candidate that we think and we know will bring change, that is us exercising, you know, the power. But at the same time, there's also a lot of anger, right? And especially given what happened again in 2007 and 2008. So dealing with this anger, but also at the same time exercising not only our constitutional right, but also our power to put these people, you know, in a position where they can serve us, because we're employing them, right? To serve us, and also being accountable, you know, of those things. So just dealing with that sort of anger and frustration, and even mistrust, you know, towards some of these politicians.
Well, it's dealing with anger in a safe way. Finding a place of safety just to channel your emotions. And it's okay to be angry because you care again. You want a better country, you want a better leadership. But then again, you have to be mindful of people around you because we have different views. And it doesn't mean that if I support a certain party, I'm a bad person or I don't want. I mean well for my country either way, in whatever party I'm coming from. So channeling your emotions in a safe way, it can look like talking about it. It can look like support. It can look like, you know, being with your family and having conversations around what's going on. So the more you are aware, the more you're able to manage getting anger outburst by periodically talking about it, channeling. There are people who can write even about how they feel. There are people who can dance, you know, dance your anger away, you know, dancing, writing, music. And Kenyans, we're very artistic, you know, we channel our emotions through art. So that can be another way of dealing with anger this time.
And even post-election, what do you foresee in terms of our mental health and state? What do you foresee? And how then, and especially when it comes to the leaders, and going through this period, which is heavy, it's just too much for them, right? What is it that then they can do post the elections, whether you win or not, you know, for the sake of your mental health? What is it that you know, they need to do?
It's that understanding that life will continue. And the world continues spinning despite whatever government will take charge. So it's finding the courage to make peace with whatever decision, being open-minded at this time, you know, that my life has to continue, and thinking about how is that going to look like with candidate A? How is that going to look like with candidate B? And even to allow yourself to grieve, because it's normal. I can use an example of, you know, maybe you've gone to a stadium to support a certain football game.
And then your team
Harambee Stars or something, or Gor Mahia. You know, you champion for your team, you roar with excitement, but then again, you roar with animosity towards the other opposing team as well. So it's okay to find the courage to be defeated and to grieve that sense of loss because of your candidate. It's a normal reaction. But then again, life has to continue, and you have to ask yourself, how is that going to look like for me? Why was I supporting this candidate? And if he doesn't get it, what am I going to lose? You know, is it a healthcare plan that was attractive in their manifesto? So how is that going to look like for you with that exact healthcare plan?
I like that. So we have a minute to go.
Well,
and I'd want you to speak to both the Kenyans and the leaders. Again, we're all Kenyans, but let's talk about like the common one, actually, and the leaders, and of course the candidates who are vying for different, you know, political seats, in terms of just maintaining peace, understanding how important our mental health is to all of us, and what we can do to, again, come 10th, 15th, you know, and days onwards, we'll still have a country that is solid and is peaceful. What would you say?
For the leaders, it starts with peaceful conversations right now before even the elections, because the way I was describing the toddler brain, the more you channel the insults, the rude conversations, people are able to pick, and you know, and people will channel that emotion to one another. So leaders have to embody peace at this time in the way they campaign for their manifestos and different ideologies, in the way they lead at this time, and having that awareness that, you know, Kenya is bigger than any of them at the end of the day. So how is it going to look like, even to grieve that loss if they may not get it, and even to lead if they manage to get it moving forward? So it goes back to peaceful conversations at this point.
I hear you. I hear you. Diana Chipko, senior psychologist and staff care specialist at Thrive Worldwide. We say thank you for coming by today. Such an insightful conversation we had as far as mental health and elections are concerned. And of course, before we end the show, let's get to hear what more of you had to say as far as the question, and that is, how have you been affected by, or have you been mentally affected by the ongoing campaigns? What are you saying? Well, Anne Mwangi Page says, yes, it's exhausting. Come September, I'm going for vacation in the forest just to exhale. Okay. And then Benson Joroge says, affected by the abusive language the people are using against their brothers and sisters, forgetting after election you will still, I think meant to say, still have him or her. All right. And then Mundi Jeff says, more than I expected. Everything is now about politics. A lot is happening out there, but nobody seems to care much. People are dying of hunger and life has become very expensive, but the whole focus is on the campaigns. All right. And then Joy Blessing says, yes, and that is why I will not vote. Okay. Then somebody else says, this is Dallas Abdullah says, maybe Beya Unga, but not election. All right, I hear you, and thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you very much for engaging with us on our social media platforms, that is on Twitter and on Facebook. Remember, the conversation continues even after this. So again, keep interacting with us on our social media platforms, or catch, of course, the full episode on YouTube. That is at NTV Kenya. But for now, we have to say goodbye. Thank you so much for staying with us. My name is Winnie Lubembe, and of course, on behalf of everybody who put together and made sure that the show is a success, we say thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow morning, same time, same place. But until then, enjoy the rest of your viewing and stay safe. Goodbye for now.